It's hard to find a studio that isn't dying to get their own hit crossover film nowadays, especially when compared to the likes of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and its numerous successes. However, it may surprise audiences to know that there have been many proposed crossover films between characters of all different films and genres, and many that were never realized.
Although the world has gotten to see massive crossover films like Freddy vs. Jason and The Avengers, there are many other movies that fans probably would have loved to see as well.
Number 10, Ash almost starred in the greatest horror crossover, Evil Dead, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and Friday the 13th. After the success of the major horror crossover Freddy vs. Jason in 2003, plans for a bigger sequel were quickly put in motion. Audiences had already seen two of horror's most legendary characters duke it out on the big screen, so throwing another major killer into the mix only made sense. However, instead of finding another villain to join the fight, the creatives had the brilliant idea to bring in Ash Williams from the Evil Dead series, once again played by the groovy Bruce Campbell.
The director of Freddy vs. Jason, Ronnie Yu, and legendary Freddy Krueger actor Robert Englund loved the concept of Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash, but negotiations to get the Deadite Hunter quickly fell through. Campbell recalls an early phone call where producers weren't interested in having Ash win the fight. Robert Shea, head of New Line at the time, didn't want Freddy to die twice in a row. Ensuing creative disputes caused the film's eventual downfall, and sadly, horror fans will never cinematically see these horror titans fight on the big screen. However, audiences can luckily see where these films might have gone in comic book form.
Number 9, Adam West Batman could have fought Godzilla, Batman and Godzilla. Batmania took the world by storm following the massive 1960s Batman television series starring Adam West and Burt Ward, followed by the feature film Batman, the movie in 1966. Around the same time, Toho's Godzilla franchise was making waves in the United States, largely thanks to the smash hit King Kong vs. Godzilla. With both series in mind, the idea was born to see them collide in a massive crossover film. Two early drafts were penned, one called Batman Meets Godzilla and the other called Batman vs. Godzilla.
While talks never made it far into production, audiences could have seen the dynamic duo arrive in Tokyo to stop a mad scientist from exploiting the world, and causing Godzilla to fight another day. In the end, Batman would have stopped Godzilla by sending them into space with an explosive, ending the battle once and for all. It's a shame audiences never got to see this wacky idea brought to life.
Number 8, Jay and Silent Bob almost fought Pinhead, Hellraiser, and Jay and Silent Bob. Abbott and Costello practically pioneered the crossover genre with their comedic characters being introduced to the likes of Frankenstein, the Wolf Man, the Invisible Man, the Mummy and more. One modern example of this classic practice almost came to light in the early 2000s. Jay and Silent Bob are two characters that could comedically fit any situation, and the chairman of Miramax at the time suggested that the two could possibly go up against the likes of Hellraiser.
The Hellraiser franchise was just one of the two suggestions up for crossover potential, as the chairman had also suggested Michael Myers from the Halloween franchise. Kevin Smith, the filmmaker and co-star behind the classic Jay and Silent Bob comedies, thought that the idea was ridiculous. Although it was a fun idea to play around with, Smith thought there could be no world where Jay, Silent Bob and Pinhead could ever exist.
Number 7, G.I. Joe and Transformers are finally teaming up, G.I. Joe and Transformers. In a rare case for proposed film crossovers, the G.I. Joe and Transformers movie seems to be moving full steam ahead. In 2023's exciting epic Transformers, Rise of the Beasts, an end credits scene teased the future possibility of the robots in disguise teaming up with the G.I. Joes. For modern audiences, this was a huge surprise. Both franchises had been so intertwined throughout pop culture history, that it's a miracle the film was finally happening.
In 2013, producer Lorenzo di Bonaventura announced that the crossover would finally happen, only for it to later fall apart. More conversations of proposed crossover films arose from there, with mostly all of them falling flat. However, fans will finally get to see the two franchises collide in a movie planned to release, most likely, sometime in 2026.
Number 6. Candyman never wanted to fight Leprechaun, Leprechaun and Candyman. Another proposed major horror crossover film was inspired by the success of Freddy vs. Jason and would have seen the legendary Candyman go up against, of all horror villains, the Leprechaun. Both franchises are steeped with incredibly frightening lore and eerie films. However, both differ in style and tone completely. Candyman is a horrific drama filled with themes of racism, social class, gentrification, violence, and more. Leprechaun had taken on a more satirical, silly style, especially with later films like Leprechaun in the Hood.
The planned crossover was merely an idea, and was shot down by Candyman actor Tony Todd for thinking that the film would have been a disservice to the legacy of Candyman. Arguably, Todd was right to keep the two characters from meeting.
Number 5. Fox fumbled their Marvel Cinematic Universe, X-Men, The Fantastic Four, and Daredevil. It's hard to remember now that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has become so globally dominant when it comes to the superhero genre. At one point, 20th Century Fox owned the rights to some of the greatest Marvel characters of all time. The X-Men franchise was one of the first film series to get audiences interested in superhero films, and Fox could always have them crossover with the Fantastic Four or Daredevil, but every plan fell through for one reason or another.
Before Disney outright purchased the entire company of 20th Century Fox, there were plans to have the two superhero giants crossover in some magnificent crossover epic. After disappointing reviews for some of the later X-Men films, as well as the numerous failed attempts to kickstart a Fantastic Four series, it's a real surprise that Fox never got very far with any kind of cinematic crossover. Now, audiences will most likely see the comic book giants crossover in a future MCU adventure.
Number 4. National Lampoon's Jaws movie almost happened, Jaws and National Lampoon. Jaws was never a film that needed sequels, but if there were going to be any, it might as well be by the writers of National Lampoon. Jaws 3, People Zero was a spoof film sequel idea pitched by David Brown and Richard Zanuck, and the film idea genuinely got a lot of traction before Universal Pictures pulled the plug entirely.
The National Lampoon title has been abused over the past several years, becoming a mere shadow of what the moniker once was. Back then, the writers of National Lampoon gave audiences films such as Vacation, Animal House, Christmas Vacation, and many more. To see them take on a Jaws film would have been a major creative step in a new direction, and one that many fans regret never came to pass.
Number 3. Spider-Man and Hulk could have teamed up sooner, Spider-Man and the Hulk. The Incredible Hulk series from the 1970s and 80s was one of the genre's defining cinematic achievements at the time, starring Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno. Around the same time, the Amazing Spider-Man television series starring Nicholas Hammond was also on the air. Although the former only lasted 2 seasons across 13 episodes, Bixby apparently expressed interest to Hammond about potentially doing a crossover between both of the comic book titans.
The Incredible Hulk series had starred massive character crossovers before, such as with Daredevil and Thor. Marvel had famously sold its cinematic rights to different production companies to stay afloat before they would eventually find success with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The crossover was going to have a 1984 date before Universal pulled from the project as they lost interest. Unfortunately, fans would have to wait years to see Spider-Man face off against the Incredible Hulk in film.
Number 2. Freddy Krueger almost met Chucky, Chucky and A Nightmare on Elm Street. Two of horror's most violent yet hilarious killers are Chucky and Freddy Krueger, and both would be perfect for a horror crossover film akin to Freddy vs. Jason. Don Mancini, the creator of the Child's Play franchise and iconic killer doll Chucky, has apparently pitched a crossover film several times. The proposed Child's Play on Elm Street would see both of the loudmouth slashers go toe-to-toe, as Elm Street isn't bloody enough for both of them.
As with most crossover films, the biggest challenge of them all is finding ways to make a peace between two film studios. Rarely does a crossover idea survive if both characters come from different studios, which seems to be the case for this movie. However, Child's Play on Elm Street isn't dead in the water. Although the Chucky series has been cancelled and the Elm Street series has laid dormant, both franchises have a knack for making a strong return.
And number 1, MIB-23 could have been the greatest crossover, Men in Black and 21 Jump Street. One of the wildest ideas to ever come out of Hollywood was the planned sequel crossover film between Men in Black and 21 Jump Street. 2012's 21 Jump Street, starring Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill, was a loving reboot of the classic 80s series where police officers go undercover in schools to sleuth out crime. Men in Black is a similar concept with a government agency solving galactic crimes on Earth. The planned crossover, called MIB-23, would have seen Tatum and Hill join the Men in Black to stop an alien invasion.
Unfortunately, talks for this film have stalled significantly and changed over the years. Channing Tatum still considers it to be the best script he's read, and he and Hill are still very passionate about making it. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, this film has seen no signs of life. However, if MIB-23 were to be made, audiences might consider it to be one of the greatest crossover films of all time.